Clara Bauer Sorensen was born in Orderville, Utah on October 21, 1915. She was the second of Benny and Harriet's 7 children. Notwithstanding a weak heart that limited her activity, Clara was known for her work ethic and charitable nature. Her spiritual heart was strong, even if her physical heart was weak. Clara worked on the ranch with the other family members. She attended Valley High School in Orderville, and after she graduated, Clara's Aunt Lily, her mother's sister, invited Clara to come and stay with her family in Holden, Utah. It was a more relaxed and peaceful environment. While there, Clara received and accepted a call to serve in the St. George LDS Temple. Her younger brother Ray was then attending school in St. George. Clara and Ray had always had a strong bond, so she moved to St. George and she and Ray became roommates. She and Ray lived in St. George for 2 years, and Clara won the love and admiration of all of her neighbors, friends, and fellow workers. When Ray graduated, he got a job with Douglas Aircraft in California. Clara decided to move to California as well. Clara and Ray again shared an apartment, and Clara got a job as a librarian in the Los Angeles County Library, and later worked as a secretary at the Veterans Hospital in West Los Angeles. When Ray married Betty English, Clara found new roommates, and through church activities she was introduced to a young man named Amron Reno Humphrey. Amron was from Shreveport, Louisiana. The two were sealed for time and all eternity in the St. George LDS Temple on July 25, 1945. After the wedding, Clara and Amron lived in Van Nuys, California for a time. While there, Clara served as primary president and later the secretary in the Relief Society. It was in Van Nuys that Clara underwent her first heart surgery. Clara and Amron ultimately decided to settle in Kanab, Utah, where they both willingly served the Lord in many capacities. Perhaps the most fulfilling of those callings was as missionaries to the local Paiute Indian branch. Amron was a skilled carpenter. He built wooden bridges and assisted with manual labor across the reservation. Clara served among the women. Because of their selfless service, the Paiute tribe trusted and respected the Humphreys. One Paiute woman in particular, Lita Segmiller, admired Clara.
Mom and Dad were on a mission for the church out to Kaibab, and he worked for the tribe, with the men from the tribe, I guess, for quite a while. He built many of the old bridges that are out between here and this village and Kaibab village, and even today they're still standing. The floods haven't taken them out or anything. He built those by hand with the tribe. And when I look at those old wooden bridges, I can see his handiwork. I know what his handiwork looks like. I know how he does things. And it's him. It's still there after all these years. And Mom used to work with the ladies out there, I guess Relief Society type things. And they knew Lita, and I think Lita had a lot of respect for Mom and Dad.
When Lita was 7 or 8 months pregnant with her son, Lita's boyfriend arrived to an outdoor celebration on the reservation in a fit of jealousy. He did not want Lita or the baby living with the child's father, Warren Mayo. He pulled out his gun and shot Lita in her abdomen. Lita and the baby were injured by the bullet, and the baby almost didn't make it. However, he was delivered early and miraculously survived. That baby had a scar on his shoulder from where the bullet grazed him.
My older brother was the one that told me, and he just matter-of-factly said, "You want to know what happened?" And I said, "You bet." And so we went for a ride and stopped, and he told me what happened. And what happened was Mom was being Mom. She had a boyfriend, and she was, I think, 8 months pregnant with me, 7 or 8 months pregnant with me. And they were having some kind of celebration, or maybe it was a funeral, I don't know, out here on the reservation to Kaibab. And it's always, at that time, it was always outside, so that who coming and going wasn't really monitored like it is now. But her boyfriend, in a fit of jealousy, it was able to get in and get real close and shot us. And because he didn't want her to be with my dad, and I guess she would told him that she wasn't going to be with him, and so he got jealous and shot us. And we both lived. We both survived.
To keep him safe, many of Lita and Warren's family members offered to take the baby and raise him as their own. Lita, however, did not feel comfortable with this arrangement. She and Warren discussed the possibility of having Amron and Clara raise the child instead.
In speaking to my sister about this, after this happened, she said that other family members came too and wanted to take me in with them. But she said she didn't feel right about it. And so she spoke to Warren, and I think it was my uncle, and they advised her, send him up to Kanab, and that might give him a leg up. And it certainly did. It did.
The Humphreys agreed to a temporary arrangement and took the 3-month-old child Conrad home in a cradle board. After a short time with Conrad, Clara knew this could not be temporary. She told Lita that she could only continue to raise Conrad if she could adopt him. This adoption proved to be a blessing to Amron and Clara, as well as Conrad. After adopting Conrad, Clara and Amron's daily life remained much the same. It was just filled with a little more love. Anywhere Clara went, little Conrad tagged along. Conrad fondly recalls many trips around town, just he and Clara. She continued to magnify her church callings, and Conrad remembers spending entire days at the church playing basketball with his friends while Clara worked away in the church office. Clara made her home a place of refuge for family, friends, and the Paiute community. Conrad became acquainted with his Paiute family within the walls of the Humphrey home. The Trailways bus line had a route from Salt Lake to Phoenix and from Phoenix to Salt Lake that ran through Kanab. This was a common route for some members of the Paiute tribe. The tribe members would take the bus, and when it stopped in Kanab, they would always find their way to the Humphreys' home for a good meal and a place to sleep. Clara always made sure to have enough food prepared on days she knew they'd be visiting, and she would even have beds made up so that those who were traveling through the night would have a place to sleep. Clara wanted Conrad to know where he was from and to embrace his Paiute community.
The Trailways bus used to run through Kanab down to Phoenix. And whenever the kids or the grown-ups from the tribe Paiute tribe would be catching the bus, either going or coming, they would always stop at our house, and they always knew they could get fed and talk to Conrad. And I can remember meeting all my cousins and my aunts and my uncles and things like people like that that were just getting ready to get on the bus or coming back. I can remember getting up in the morning real early and going down to pick up my brother on the bus. I think that was, the bus would get in town at 3 o'clock, 3:30, something like that. But they would always come and knock on the door at 3:30 in the morning, and Mom and Dad would get up and let them in and put them to sleep on the couch. Then they would call someone, and someone would come and pick them up. But I met a lot of the tribal members from Kaibab the first time like that.
Clara was an incredibly patient woman and never spoke harshly of others and never seemed to lose her temper.
Mom, I knew Mom up until I was 10 years old. I was quite young. I do remember perhaps the time we broke the big geode, the big super round geode she had. Just an even-tempered lady, never got out of sorts that I remember. Dad was the same way. Never got out of sorts that I can remember. Maybe they did, but not in front of me.
So Conrad mentioned breaking the geode. Let's hear about that. One thing you have to know about Clara is she was kind of a rock hound, and she would collect, rocks. And one thing she would collect is geodes, which is a rock formation that is kind of round, kind of oval round, and then inside it has a crystalline formation. And you see them in rock shops where they slice them up, etc. And on their front porch in Kanab, Clara had a bunch of these geodes. And the thing about their front porch is a wooden front porch, but it was smooth. It had a real smooth surface, kind of like a little concrete layer, right? And so Conrad and I were sitting out there playing one day, and we were playing with a ball, throwing it back and forth. And Clara came out, and she expressly said, she pointed to those geodes. And what did she say?
She said, "Don't play with these rocks."
And so as soon as she walked in the house, we grabbed this one geode that was perfectly round. I guess we hadn't thought about it before, but once she told us not to, we just picked it right up and we started playing with it. And there's this perfectly round geode, just like a ball. We started rolling it back and forth, and Conrad was on one side of the porch and I was on the other, and we were sitting there kind of like with our legs out in a V so you would catch it. Remember that? And you'd roll it and you'd catch it back and forth. And we rolled it for probably 3 or 4 minutes, and then all of a sudden Conrad rolled it to me, and I had it in my hands. I was about to roll it back, and I heard the screen door open on the front porch, and it unnerved me a little bit. And as I pushed it, I kind of lifted the geode a little bit. Remember? And it just, so it went in the air probably a foot or so, and then kind of dropped back down. And as it hit, it rolled 2 or 3 rotations, and then it split in half. It just split in one.
Split.
Right? One half kind of went that way, one half went the other way. And then we're sitting there, and Clara walks out the door, and she sees this happening, and she looks at Conrad, and I looked over at Conrad's eyes were like this big. No. And she looked at me, she looked at that geode, and I thought, we are so in trouble. I was sure we were going to get a beating of some kind. And she looked at us, and then she just kind of closed her eyes and stared off a little bit, and she said, "You might search the rest of your life and never find a geode as perfectly round as that one was." And then she just turned around and walked back in the house. And I sat there, we just looked at each other, and, she could have given us a beating. I don't think there's anything she could have done other than say those words that would have stuck in our heart like that did. I remember that like it was yesterday. Can you remember that?
That really affected you, didn't it?
It did. Clara was an exceptional cook and a talented seamstress. She enjoyed spending time at the family ranch and teaching the girls to cook. Her baking skills were much appreciated, and she made the most delicious chocolate cakes, blueberry pies, and Conrad's personal favorite, tamale pies. Conrad jokes that he's never met a Mexican friend who could make a tamale pie like his mother. One of Clara's favorite weekends of the year was state conference weekend. For nieces and nephews, state conference was a welcome memory because they always got to go to Aunt Clara's and have a wonderful meal afterwards. Between all the duties and demands of motherhood and the responsibilities of being a wife and the numerous opportunities to serve, Clara was very busy. Over time, however, the condition of her heart continued to worsen. She began spending more and more time in doctors' offices and in the hospital. However, in spite of her physical limitations, she continued to make her role as a mother a priority. At times, when she would have extended hospital stays, she would make a lunch for Conrad. Conrad would leave school on his lunch break and come to the hospital and eat lunch in the hospital room with his mother. Clara loved Conrad. The night Clara passed away, January 14, 1966, was not much different from any other night. Conrad wished his parents good night and headed off to bed. He remembered being cold and getting out of bed to ask Clara for another blanket. He and Clara spoke briefly in the hallway before Conrad headed back to sleep. That exchange would be their last. Amron woke Conrad in the morning and told him Clara had passed away during the night. Conrad recalls sitting at Clara's bedside and telling her that he missed her.
Well, it was pretty much just like any other night. We'd all had supper, and I went to bed. It was cold. I can remember it being really cold and asking for another blanket. And so I got up and we got another blanket and I put it on, and I spoke to her then in the hallway. Something or other, and that was the last time I spoke to her. And Dad woke me up the next morning and set me there on the edge of the bed, and he said, "I got something to tell you." And I said, "Yeah." And he said that Mom has passed on and passed away. And I knew she'd been sick. I knew that she was getting weaker. I knew that. And I tried to help her as much as I could before that. And I went in and spoke to her, there by the bed and a little bit, and told her that I would miss her and whatnot. And then I can just remember all kinds of people coming to the house. Just half the town, was there at the house, on the lawn, sitting on the porch and whatnot.
Clara was buried 2 days later in Orderville, and many family and friends congregated to express sympathy, love, and support.
When Mom passed, and those of you who were there at the funeral there in Kanab, you noticed how many Indian people came, and those were all of, about 3/4 of them were my relatives from just the village. And some of them had come from St. George and Cedar City and for the funeral. And that's the respect that they had for Grandpa. I think everyone in Kaibab knew Mr. Humphrey. They all used to call him Mr. Humphrey, never Amron or that man, or a lot of times they will call people that man, and everyone knows who they're talking about in Kanab, but they would always call him Mr. Humphrey. And they tease me sometimes, and they will call me Mr. Humphrey. And I'll just look at them.
It has been written that the word no was not in Clara's vocabulary, and she was known to serve efficiently and with seeming ease. At only 51 years old, many questioned why one so young and willing to serve the Lord would be taken away. However, one relative noted, "I should just say thank you to God for leaving her here with us as long as he did. I can still almost hear her say, 'I love life, and I am sure it will be eternal.'" Conrad, too, wondered why Clara was taken so early. He also wondered why Amron never remarried.
From then on, it just Dad and I against the world, and that's the way it was. And I often wondered why he never remarried, but as I got older, I realized that he just loved Mom so much that he didn't want anyone else, and he was going to wait for her forever. And that's the way it was, and I can respect that. I understand what it's like to be like that.
In a memoir written of Clara, one recalls, "Clara wasn't one who had to lay down this mortal body and go beyond to enter heaven. She and Amron made a heaven here on earth." Amron lived another 43 years after Clara died. Amron was a hard worker, and he continued to work up until he died. While everyone knew Clara was a good cook, Amron also liked to cook. He also loved to fish. Most people who knew Amron have a good story about going fishing with him.
I remember that Dad always liked to go fishing, and he loved the little creek above Orderville. I think that was called the Virgin River. And we used to go up there constantly. Now, when I go north, I travel past that same little stream, and I often look down there and wonder, I wonder if they're still fishing that pond down there, or that little creek. Wonder if I could catch one of those. But when I go down there, it's all marked no trespassing and whatnot, so I don't go. And I can't remember who owns it, so I don't go ask. So I remember he liked to go fishing there, and we used to spend a lot of weekends there.
Amron was a good man. He invited me over for dinner, so I went over to dinner. The first time he ever made dinner for me was biscotti. And I was amazed, that a man like him, because I never had any man cook for me, that he made biscotti, and we ate, and he taught to me, and I taught to him. And then me and Conrad started going together, and then we went fishing one summer. We went up to Traffic reservoir. And there I didn't know how to fish. I was staying in the vehicle we drove up there, so that should be love. He had a camper on, so I just stayed in there, was drawing books and stuff like that, keeping myself busy. And then he knocked on the window. He goes, "Come on, I'll show you how to fish," he said. So I walked down to the river with him and the lake, and he put on a bait for me, and he had Clara as a fishing pole. So I was fishing with that, and he told me how to do it. And so so I caught a fish, and he told me, pull it up, you know. So I pull it up, roll it in, and it was a little, probably about 2 inches or 3 inches of fish or some of that trout. And then that's when I love to fish.
Amron was active in the LDS single adult program and for years drove the single adult bus to St. George and back for the monthly temple trips. Amron passed away one spring evening in 2009. He was 98 years old, but at the time of his death, his mind was still sharp and his body was still active. He was found by a church leader who noticed that Amron was not in his regular seat at sacrament meeting. Amron was sitting in the chair in his kitchen table. He had opened Saturday's mail, and on the table was his newly renewed Utah driver's license. Clara's absence was hard on Conrad, but other family members tried to fill the void.
I think I really missed Mom growing up in my teenage years. I kind of missed that. Period with her when I was a teenager. Needed that mom connection. And, I got that a lot from Aunt Dot. I got that same feeling from Aunt Dot, and that's why when she passed, I was so upset. It really upset me when she passed. I always wanted to tell her boys how much I appreciated their friendship, of being raised a lot with them, spending summers in Orderville with the boys. I appreciated that. Instead of being left on my own in Kanab, I was always put over there in Orderville. In the beginning, I didn't like it, but after about the first summer there, I got to the point where I looked forward to it. I didn't know what I would do with my summers if I didn't go there. Same thing with the Sorensens, with Harriet and Claudia and Lillian and all the girls over there. Lee and Dallas were just a little bit older, so I didn't have too big of a chance to spend time with them. I did a little bit with Dallas when he had come back from the service. He and I went a few places together.
Did you ever spend any time with Mott's family up on
I did. I spent one summer in Dietrich, Idaho. Ruby and I went through Dietrich. And, we went through Twin Falls, and then we went north to try and find Dietrich. When we did find Dietrich, we couldn't find the farm. We drove all over, and we couldn't find it. I guess it was pretty simple to find, I imagine, but we couldn't do it. But I can remember we cut hay and baled hay and woke up very early in the morning, like 4 o'clock, and milked cows. They had a lot of milk cows and dairy farm. And we did that all summer, and I learned what work was about and responsibility. And I came away from there knowing that I had a part to play, and if I didn't do my part, it wasn't going to get done. And so I learned that from Uncle Mont. He was a good teacher. He was patient. But yeah, I could tell sometimes that I would push him right to the edge. He'd get that look. I know that look that but he'd take the time to teach me how to do things and do it right. And all of my uncles were like that. I would push them right to the edge sometimes, and they would just kind of step back and take another shot at it, and they could do it and teach me how to do things. A lot of my memories were with the Sorensen boys were work. We didn't have a lot of leisure time, I guess, in Orderville. We were always expected to work all the time. If you weren't working, it was a bad thing. They'd always find something for you to do.
Conrad graduated from Kanab High School and entered the military. He later became an Army Ranger.
We started our class with about 230 to 240 people. When we finished our Rangers class, we had 40 of us left. They thought that was a big graduation class. Usually they figured it would be about 25 to 30. But it was a big class, a lot of good people there.
Conrad was deployed to Panama and lived in Germany and other places around the world. After returning from the military, Conrad returned to the reservation to reconnect with the traditions of his Paiute nation.
I didn't really start going back to the reservation until I returned from the service. And during the service, I had met so many different types of people. And most of those people the close friends of mine would tell me, you've got to go back and meet your family. You've got to go back and see where you come from. That's one thing you need to do. So when I came home, I was working downtown in Kanab, and I met my cousin, Elwin John, and he and I had always been friends ever since high school. And he said, yeah, let's go meet my brother. My brother's in Fredonia. So I met his brother, and then the whole res just opened up for me. And I went out to Kaibab and met cousins and uncles and aunts and different people. But it wasn't all, oh, look, there's Conrad, let's invite him in. It wasn't like that. Yeah, I had to prove to them, just like I had to prove to you people, that I belonged there. And sometimes that got personal. Sometimes it, was punch it out. Yeah. Because that's just the way it is out on the res. You've got to learn to fight. You've got to learn to talk. You can talk your way out sometimes, and sometimes you can't. So
Conrad has been very active in powwow activities and has danced in the native ceremonies all across the nation. Conrad married Ruby Begay, a pretty Navajo girl. The intertribal marriage caused a bit of a stir, but they were determined to marry. Conrad and Ruby Humphrey have 4 children: Lucianne, Luann, Amron, Rocco, and Conroy. They live today on the Kaibab Paiute Reservation in northern Arizona. Conrad had the opportunity to be part of 2 families. The Humphrey family is the adopted son of Clara and Amron, and the Mayo family is the biological son of Warren Mayo and Lita Segmiller. That experience has shaped his life and given him a perspective that others do not have.
Mostly in the summertime, I would come over. I would spend 3 months over there in Orderville with the people there. And they taught me responsibility and the value of hard work. If something wasn't done, you were going to feel it down the road. And the Paiute side, not as much. When I first started going over there, the older people were still in charge. And the younger people like myself, we had all been off, either been on placement program or raised in different families or whatnot. And we started coming back, and we could see the difference, between where we had lived and been before, and then coming back to the reservation. It just wasn't going to work the way they did things. You can't sit around and think about things for a week before you get it done. And that was what was being done there. Being raised by people like Uncle Maud and Uncle Hugh. And, you can't sit around and think about things for a week and then go do it. It's got to be done now, and you've got to think on the fly and get it done. And that's, I don't want to say laziness on the part of the natives, but sometimes it is. And I think it's just traditional to sit around and think about things before you do something, versus the white side is, you have this planned what you're going to do, and this is how we're going to do it, and you get into it and you get it done. And that's what a lot of people my age introduced to this tribe when we came home, was the ability to get things done. We're so far ahead now than they used to be.
My experience with living with the white and raising by the Navajos, I learned a lot from my foster mom and my foster dad, that I was the oldest, and I know that both of them were working, so she taught me how to cook, she taught me how to clean and all that. That's where I picked it up. And I think my grandkids would say that because they like my cooking. And then the Navajo side is, I pick all that up because the good thing I got out of is weaving Navajo rugs from my older sister, Lucille. She taught me how to do that. So, and I passed that on to my grandkids. And I tell them where they should know what tribe they are and how they're related to my side of the family. And their grandpa is Kaibat Paiute, so they know that all these things, where they come from. But that's what I said. I learned both sides, and I don't regret, living with the white or the Navajos. So I'm just proud that I got both sides of the learning that I got from them.
Clara Bowers Sorensen's life was short, but her life cast a long shadow on the lives of those who knew her. She will always be remembered as a kind soul whose life reflected the principles of her faith.